We've currently got the track Outside is Open, where we're going to be looking at the different parts and any particular things that I've done towards the mix and the master differently since we've looked at all the individual parts. So obviously the first thing I did is I set up my master fader, master aux fader. On this I've got the master deck, a saturator. I've got two 7-band EQs. One's like the main EQ that I used alongside the Sans Plus, and then I've got a second one just so I don't get in the way of the first one, if that makes sense. Like adding on to it rather than trying to do everything at once on one. It gets a bit finicky when you try and do that. So sometimes it's worth doing more than one for that reason. And then obviously the Pro limiter. For this track, I've got it coming out at... Let's have a look. I'm just going to turn it down a little bit. So, currently just listening to this part, I've got it coming out at a -11 lus, which is really, really good, to be fair. It's like, it's the volume, it's more than loud enough for what I'm aiming for. However, at one point in the track itself becomes really, really dense. So one thing that I've done new is there was nothing I could do mix-wise, otherwise I'd lose like my dynamics. So the way I got around it is on the master, not the signal bus processing one, the actual master fader, I've automated the volume very, 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 very lightly, as you can see here. There's a very minor change and then it slowly fades back into where it was. Just on this section of the track. Just because it's too dense and there's a lot going on. Enough so that you can't hear the difference, and the fact that it's a pause kind of works in my favour for that. It's very important that you don't go too far with that though, otherwise you run the risk of it being a noticeable difference. It's so minor that it's only noticeable if you like really hone in on it, and you can obviously see where it starts. But if it wasn't pointed out, then it probably wouldn't be noticed, and that's what you want to aim towards, because like it's all just about avoiding the clipping. That's all that's for. Next from here, I've got some automation on the panning again for the back end vocal. So if I solo it here, I'll show you. And then it goes back this way before coming back into the centre again. It does this based on what I did for Forbidden Fruit with those guitars. I was like, oh, what if I did that for vocals, and I did it a lot slower and had it like pan across, which had a really nice effect for the mix, and it's something nice and decorative that I really enjoyed doing and like the sound of. So, is there anything else that I've done? So for this track, I did a drum bus. So, as I mentioned previously about groups, rather than making a group sometimes, something that I could always do is, in the same way I made this master aux track, I can make an aux track that I can then send all the individual parts of something from. So, in this case, it's the drums. So, the kick, the snare, the two overheads, and the room mic have all been sent to a stereo aux track, which is the drum bus, and then that drum bus is sent to, is routed to the master aux, and then that master aux is then routed to the main out. So it may seem complicated, but if you can get your head around like the routing side of things, this is a really efficient way of being able to control your mix, because what you can then do is you could have your vocal bus, like once you've found like the balance of individual things, like we mentioned, the balance between the kick, snare, overheads, whatever, of your drums, you don't want to change that. You want to leave it as it is because you've like perfected that part, but you want it to fit into the slot of your mix. So a good way of being able to have a fader to control that is by creating a drum bus. You can also then do things to the drum bus to make the drum sound more together. in my case, I've done a drum verb. Like, I've created a reverb just for the drums to make it sound like its own room. But a good way I could avoid of doing that on the individual ones, I could put it on the drum bus, and then ultimately that helps me create my drum sounds from that. And then once all that is done, rather than having this really, really messy mix, I'm not proud of how I've laid this one out. There's no folders this time or anything like that, and everything's kind of everywhere. I could literally finish everything, go over here at the side and hide all the tracks that I'm not using right now, and just leave the bus tracks and the master fader, and I can sit there and I can go, oh, the drums need turning up, turn the drums up. Or the guitars need turning up, turn the guitars up. The bass is too loud, turn the bass down. It's all just one fader, and it'll go from all these clunky folders into 5 or 6 faders that I can then control and adjust the tones for. And then of course from there, if I ever needed to just go, oh, the snare's too loud, I can just go in and turn the snare down. It's like, and it makes the flow a lot more simpler. That's an example of something we can do. Obviously I've only done it like minorly on here. But other than that, there's not really anything else like major or like different that I've done on this mix. I've once again used the master deck. Like I mentioned, the saturation. For this track, it's quite well driven. There's a lot of saturation going on, but it's the style of the track, I'd argue. And then just to recap, that other part where I automated the master volume to be down slightly, it's just useful for maintaining like your volume for like a dense part of the track, because I don't want to lose the dynamics, but I don't want it to be clipping, and I'm really pushing it with how loud I've got it with its -11 LUFS. That part of the track's obviously then louder than that. It's like pushing like almost 9, which is all good, but it won't be good if it's digitally clipping. So yeah, that's all for Outsiders. Thank you.